All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. What an amazing final day of the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. Hopefully, I haven't said the word amazing too many times already this week, but it was a big last day. So let me get to the beginning here. And I can't believe it's the last day. I think I'm going to have a little bit of withdrawals after this. If you feel weird feelings too, that's normal. And today really started off with probably my very worst drawing of John Muir Laws that I've ever done. That might have been my sacrificial pancake. Hopefully the sound's okay. I guess the sound was bad yesterday. Maybe I should take this jacket off here because the jacket makes weird noises. But day 5, the final day, as usual, it started with the poem and the challenge. I think if you want to do the challenge, it might not be too late. And the challenge was to go to a place that you feel connection. Start with I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And then this was sort of what we did during his keynote too. Write down what you want out of your nature journaling practice. What do you want from the nature journaling community? And what are you going to do to make that happen? That was the challenge. And the poem was from our very own Nina Khan, who's in the backstage pass right now. Let me know if my sound is weird. This shirt doesn't have a lapel, so hopefully it's... Oh, Arctic Night Moon is here. Yes, that is a good point. That is the reason why I do not end up doing, that's one of the reasons why I end up not doing the challenge, is I just am doing so many other stuff during the day as well. And I am marathoning it, and I did succeed at marathoning the entire conference. It started out a little bit rough this morning, but I think it ended with the best drawing that I've done of John Muir Laws. So stay to the end to see that. Anyways, it was a great poem, a good challenge. I left some space here. Hopefully I'll fill that in with something eventually. The very first class was with Anastasia Morozova, and she's known as Natura Illustrata on Instagram. She has a very big Instagram following, like 200,000 or 300. She's up there in the hundreds of thousands of followers, and she has a really great style. If you've seen her style, or at least I really like the way her drawings look. She did a big trip in Southeast Asia for 5 months. Most of this content on her Instagram is from that trip, and it gets recycled a lot. So it's a little bit like, okay, it would be cool to see some new content. But anyways, her class was quite good, and it was really cool to hear about her trip. The follow along part was only doing this one Tokay gecko sketch, or not sketch, it's more like an illustration. So that was the only part that was like follow along. The rest of it was her talking, but there were a lot of great quotes from her. I learned a lot. Here's one I highlighted, is that she likes high contrast. Another funny part was she drew this jar full of centipedes and snakes and alcohol, and she said, "This drink gives men power, if you know what I mean." So this is why I like to draw the teacher and make room for the quotes, because there's funny stuff and then there's also important stuff. Like if you're trying to learn about someone's style, looking at their Instagram and just looking at all their paintings is not really a great way to learn. But taking a class with them and actually trying to do it the way, see, I didn't use my style for this illustration. I tried to follow the exact instructions that she gave, which is really challenging for my brain. I'm the kind of person that I look at the reference image and I just want to do my own thing. But sometimes it's really helpful to actually try to go through the steps and learn something by doing it the way that another person does. She also had this cool eraser technique where she takes a kneaded eraser, she rolls it up into a sausage shape, and then she actually can roll the eraser on the paper. It's more like a snake, I would say, like when you make a snake out of clay, and then she rolls it on the paper as an eraser. How cool is that? So that was something I learned from her class as well. The importance of contrast, as you can see, that's something that I highlighted, and I think that might be the part about her her work that resonates with me. So when you get a chance to take a class with someone and you know you like their style, it's a good opportunity to try to analyze what's going on with their work that you actually like and see if that's something that you can incorporate. So this class with Nishant Jain was not my first class with him. He's also known as a sneaky artist on Instagram, where he has like 300,000 followers. So another one of the real big heavy hitters on Instagram at the conference this year. I had taken a class with him before, and I interviewed him earlier on the Nature Journal show. So you can check out that interview if you look at my playlist of Wild Wonder 2024. I interviewed a lot of these instructors. Didn't get a chance, wasn't able to schedule Anastasia, but I did get him on the show, which was really fun. And I did take a class with him before the conference. So I was a little bit familiar with his style and his teaching method. He's full of quotes. So you can see here in my sketch notes that I quickly ran out of space for all of the amazing quotes he had. He talked about why sneaky art. He talked about observing without disturbing. It makes him a better person on location or not at all. So he does all of his work on location. He doesn't work from photos later. A sketchbook habit has taught him to observe. And art practice is only sustainable if it is connected to what you are actually curious about. So this is really, really important, especially for people who are trying to monetize their art or their nature journaling, is to remember that you have to stay connected to your own personal curiosity or you might burn out eventually. He talked about nature journaling his newborn baby, which he also talked about during the backstage pass, and I'll get there in a minute. This is the pen he uses for 90% of his drawing. It's a Lamy Safari fountain pen, and he uses carbon ink. For drawing trees, he often uses them as sort of an outline around his subject, which is usually an urban subject. He also talked, and his class got into the sketching right away. So he didn't talk too much. It was like right into the sketching. So if you like classes where there's a lot of hands-on, this class was hands-on, but also lots of cool concepts like his attention spiral. He talked about his attention spiral and how he doesn't fight his attention wandering anymore. I thought that was really interesting. So he talked about how he, instead of fighting where his brain is going or what his attention is doing, he kind of goes with the flow. And he has a really interesting philosophy about art and style, such as the importance of embracing your own lines and making long lines and trusting those long lines, which is the exact opposite of a class earlier this week by Sofia Gazarian about making little short lines. So I think it's so interesting how at a conference like this, you can have two teachers say exactly opposite things or recommend exactly opposite things. And I think for us as learners, the most important thing is to try both of those and see. And one of the best things about the human brain, well, it can be a problem too, but humans are capable of holding two contradictory beliefs in their mind at the same time, cognitive dissonance. So this here was a concept about line width and depth. So the furthest away thing should be a thin line, middle distance should be a medium line, and closer should be a thick line. There was something about how to use the 4 layers that I kind of lost, but we did a lot of practice. Here are some of his main tools besides the Lamy Safari fountain pen. He doesn't like these jelly rolls, but he loves these Posca pens. He does use a Fude Demonin, which I use as well, and some colored pencils. And yeah, that was a great class. We worked from a couple of his photos. And I was trying to use a lot of this was done with Posca. I did use Posca pen, but then I had some leftover gouache from a previous class, so I mixed that in. And that's one of the fun things to do at the Wild Wonder Conference is if you have materials left over from one class, you can take those materials from one class and apply them to the next class. And I think that when you have to synthesize something that you're learning, it helps you learn it so much better. So if you take something from Nishant's class, you combine it with something from Claire Giordano's class, or you combine it with something from Anastasia's class. That's where the real learning starts to take place. Claire was obviously a very well practiced teacher of watercolor, so it was great to take this class with her. And this was the monochromatic mountains class. So sometimes what I do is, if the class only has like one drawing, I will actually make two, because then it sort of helps take the pressure off for me, and it allows me to experiment in two places at the same time. It does give me more work to do, but sometimes with watercolor, you're waiting for the paint to dry anyways. Like this class, there were a lot of moments where she stopped working and was answering people's questions because she's waiting for the paint to dry. I don't need to be waiting for the paint to dry, so I had two going at the same time. And then I'm also taking sketch notes of everything she's saying, or as much as possible. She's a big fan of working in as few layers as possible, which is really interesting. She works a lot in the field. She interestingly gets stressed out about messing up sketchbooks, like getting precious about the sketchbook. So she usually works from loose paper. Simplifying is really important for her. She's not a big fan of perfect gradients. She had some strong feelings about that. She's not picky about watercolor brushes. My Google Calendar is going crazy. She's not it's probably telling me it's time to go to sleep. She's not picky about watercolors. She likes synthetic watercolor brushes better, which I thought was really interesting. So this was a great class for me. I learned a lot. This isn't the style that I usually use, but taking some of these classes a little bit outside of your zone, you can learn so much. And on day 5, I've been practicing and taking these classes every single day, every single class for the last 5 days. So I think I'm starting to get warmed up. I know my brain knows, okay, we're filling the page. So just getting in a lot of practice and definitely learning a lot in this class. And then this is really sad and happy at the same time, because Akshay's class was the very last class of the conference. So this class right here was your last chance. I mean, the keynotes are great, the discussions are great, but this was the very last class. So that was a little bit scary. And when I cut this out and pasted it in here, it was definitely a little bit like, oh my gosh, the last class of the conference. And that's just a pro tip, is you can print out the schedule and cut them out really easily. So here he was dressed up in costume. That's why he looks like this. And it was all about his love story with moss, which was super, super fun. I learned a cool science word, which is nyctinasty. In case you didn't know that word, this would be one of those perfect words to bring up at Thanksgiving. If you live in the US and you have Thanksgiving dinner with your family, and there start being these like uncomfortable conversations, or people are talking about dumb things about how they're gonna, add some cool new color to their car or whatever, you can just bring up these nature things, such as, did you know that snakes have 2 penises? Or did you know what the word nyctinasty means? So I love learning geeky new things like that from people like Akshay, and it was really fun. I tried to put in some of his funny stuff here, how he had a life-changing event when he met John Muir Laws. Talked a lot about growth mindset and how things are a learnable skill. Journaling outside the bathroom is a learnable skill, sort of an inside joke. Chilling while a tarantula is chilling on you is a learnable skill. And falling in love is a learnable skill too. His presentation was really well organized. It was pretty fast paced. So be ready for that. And you can tell he has a ton of energy. There was also a dance break. So be prepared to actually dance along. Moving your body, getting your blood flowing is good for learning too. So if you can, try to dance along during his class. Then basically his class had a built-in virtual field trip. So some classes at the conference, and I was wishing Anastasia's, I was sort of hoping Anastasia's would have a virtual field trip in Southeast Asia, because she had just been in Southeast Asia and she was talking about the trip. She had a slideshow about Southeast Asia and her trip, but it wasn't like a virtual field trip. In contrast, like in my class, we had a virtual field trip. In Akshay's class, there was a virtual field trip, and it was a moth night. So he taught us this new framework and a zine that's being published through Wild Wonder. You can get it. You have to fill out this whole form and everything to get it, but technically it's for free. You just have to give your address and all of this stuff. But you can get the zine, and the framework of the zine is a way to think about moths where you notice and you draw the features that are important for identification. This is something I've talked about with plants a lot, and Ivea, who's here, also talks about this. But like when you're drawing a plant or you're drawing an animal, there's certain characteristics where you can have artistic license with, and then there's other characteristics that if you draw them with too much artistic license, like how many petals a flower has, suddenly that petal, that plant is not identifiable as that plant anymore. So that's basically what his class was about, and he had a bunch of timed exercises. I think timed exercises makes a Zoom class a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, and it just puts a little bit of pressure on learning. And learning works best when you're just slightly uncomfortable or there is some amount of pressure. It's actually beneficial stress. It's that's a whole other topic. Anyways, here you can see these were all the different categories for his class, and these were all exercises where he had like 15 seconds or 13 seconds to draw these different things based on this whole framework that he's developed with the important characteristics for identifying moths. One of them is the 2D shape. This is one you might do sort of intuitively. The 3D shape, like how do they fold up? Do they hold their wings up? The fashionistas, like do they have accessories such as hairy legs, pointy snouts, or tufts? And identifying all of these things kind of breaks down for people who aren't lepidopterists how to nature journal a moth and capture the information that will be useful in identifying it. Patterns in minor color. And that was it. It was an amazing class. There was a dance party in the middle of it. You could tell he spent a lot of time. So there's certain classes, I'm not going to like point fingers or anything like that, but there's certain classes where you can tell the person spent a lot of time practicing how long their thing is going to be and how to fit it into the time that there is. There's other classes where you can tell the timing was not really like, it didn't really fit into the 80 minutes or whatever. You can tell Akshay put a ton of time into this class. So it'll be great as a video session. It was amazing as a live, and it was the last class, so I almost cried. And then we had, like a 15-minute break, and then it was this pre-recorded conversation. So I was a little bit doubtful about a pre-recorded conversation. Usually that's why I do a marathon, because I like things live. It's easier for me to motivate and actually be a good student when something is live. This was a pre-recorded conversation between John Muir Laws and Tony Foster, but it was still really good. And Jack was there in person. I think Beth might have been there to introduce them at the beginning. Anyways, it was good, and there were some good quotes. Tony Foster said that he gropes his way to a solution. All of his pieces are about time in a way. He talked about his time series. He does these huge watercolor paintings. If you've never heard of Tony Foster, just do a search, tonyfoster.org, I think. It's the museum that collaborates with the Wild Wonder Foundation to do the in-person stuff. He does these huge watercolor landscape paintings where he does it on location. He doesn't work from photos at all. He goes to like Mount Everest or exploding volcanoes, and he sits out there with a huge piece of watercolor paper, like massive piece of watercolor painter, and paints for days. Long days, 12-hour days out there painting in the sun, in the wind, or the rain. Anyways, he's pretty amazing person, and he talked about his approaches and everything like that. And Jack asked him questions. This is the Point Reyes Peninsula right here. Tony painted it because it's moving along the California coast through time. Here's a little sketch sort of showing his setup. Here's some sketches I did when they were talking about the geology of the Grand Canyon. Here's Tony Foster casually walking across hot lava, still hot lava. He said his boots were melting. Then he got to the volcano. it was just a little pimple. And then he was writing in his diary in his tent. This was in Hawaii. It was raining. He was sadly writing in his diary in his tent because he couldn't see anything. And then suddenly the whole sky lit up. He went outside and the volcano was erupting all night long, and he painted all night long. So just casually dropping stories like this. I mean, the guy's been drinking yak butter tea up on in a monastery next to like Mount Everest, painting Mount Everest for 6 days. So, I mean, the guy's pretty amazing. So, you know, worth checking that out and just kind of seeing that conversation. It'll be good as a recorded version because it already was a recorded version. And that was the last one. Oh, he talked a little bit about his Cornish hedge project, which I thought was interesting. So I make these notes when it's something I want to follow up on. And then the very last keynote. So Beth, Elizabeth Kelly Galogly, the director and co-founder of the Wild Wonder Foundation, the person who basically came up with the idea of having this conference in the first place. She introduced Jack, which was cool. She talked about how meeting Jack changed her life forever, how she thinks about what would Jack do, sort of like what would Jesus do. And fear is not a motivating force. And then I think this drawing of Jack, like his chin came out kind of big, but I feel like I got his shirt. So I feel like that was a little bit of a, what's the word? There's a word, it starts with R-E. But okay, so check this out. This is my drawing of Jack in the morning. And then this is my drawing of Jack tonight. So I think it got a little bit better. I redeemed myself. That's it. I feel like this drawing sort of redeemed me a little bit from that earlier drawing. Maybe that was my sacrificial pancake. It doesn't look anything like him. But hey, you know what did Nishant say? Like, our mistakes are you know, part of our style. So anyways, there he is with his amazing shirt. It was a great keynote. Jack is a really good speaker. He's well practiced at speaking. He's motivational. He varies his tone. He doesn't talk like a robot. He does a lot of research. He knows how to use Zoom in ways that are like entertaining. So it's a good keynote. If you're into like talks and everything like that, the time went by pretty fast. It's the last talk of the event. So it's good to check it out. He talked about why should we nature journal. He talked about neuroplasticity. He had all of these different benefits of nature journaling, going from being present to improving your memory to helping you slow down to cognitive offloading. So he dropped some science articles. He talked about how nature is good for your health. So nature, journaling, and then also community. So he had this whole part about community, which was really interesting. And we had at the very end a little bit of a journaling prompt. So it was a little bit participatory there at the end. And then I realized I was on the last page of my journal. So I think I filled 52 pages in my journal during the conference. I managed to go to every poem, every class. I missed one Pencil Miles and Chill because I was preparing for my class. Other than I went to every class, every keynote, and I sketch note at every single one. And I made it to all the backstage passes as well, not to the end. I think they end up going way past the time I think they go past the time they're supposed to end at. But anyways, here's backstage pass. Beth was like, "Are you okay, Ray Bonto? Isn't it late over there?" And he's like, "I'm fine until 6 a.m. So I think it's 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in England. Ray Bonto's still awake. He's still there. We talked about some heavy stuff. Nishant shared his sketches that he's been doing of his baby, which I noticed before, and I think it's amazing that he's been documenting such a personal thing, and it's part of what's nature about humans is birth and death and reproduction. You know, it's like kind of amazing topic, but it's also something we don't usually point our nature journal at. Jack also shared a really deep story about nature journaling, these huge life transitions of loved ones in our family. And so that was really powerful. I don't think backstage passes are recorded. So if you missed it, you missed it. Next year, if you can, even if you have to stay up late, I'm so glad, you know, it's way past my bedtime, but I'm so glad I stayed up. And then Beth also said something funny about sending art supplies to free art supplies to Ray Bonto. So that was it. That was the end of the conference. I'm probably gonna take a huge break tomorrow. I filled up this. I mean, look at this. That's a lot of, look at, from, you know, Fibonacci to page layout with Mike Rohde, you know, from charcoal chickadees to watercolor skies to poems about phobias. I did the phobia about teeth, odontophobia, to like these amazing bird colors, to, you know, lush garden florals, to like this spider class with Verena. You know, look at all these zines. I mean, how many zines did we make in this conference? To all these like crazy puffin conservation stories. It's been a pretty big week. I filled a lot of pages. I feel pretty good about all the practice I've done. I'm definitely going to take a break tomorrow, but I might do a video or something where I summarize the event. I also have considered doing something about the supplies. It was really hard this year, I feel like, to be prepared supplies wise for the different classes. So if you're feeling frustration around that, it's understandable. Some of the supplies lists weren't made available until like the very last minute. So I might do a post on my website or a video where I go through all of the supplies, because sometimes, you know, in some of these classes, they talk about, you know, like they talk about supplies that they didn't mention in their supplies list. Like in the class with Sushma, she wasn't really wearing a tie-dye shirt. I was trying to get her blouse, but it didn't come out quite right. She talked about how she likes to use a Hanamulla zigzag sketchbook. I didn't even know about those sketchbooks. Also, for example, Claire's class, guess what? Do you like this style? Are you interested in the style? Well, guess what? An important part of this style that she mentioned in her class is the type of brush she uses. She prefers stiffer synthetic brushes. I've been using this fancy brush, the one watercolor brush that I have that's not a water brush like what most nature journalists use. The one like with real animal hairs. It's probably unethical. The real watercolor brush that I have, it's very thirsty and it's not synthetic. And she mentioned how a stiffer brush that's not synthetic actually works better for her technique. That was kind of mind-blowing for me. So that's something that I'm going to think about. And she had a couple other tips about supplies that were really interesting and really useful. And I think that knowing about those before you take the class would be really helpful. So I might make a video or something kind of summarizing those. But other than that, there's probably going to be some really big changes with the Nature Journal show coming up in the next weeks or months. So stay tuned and be sure to check out the playlist where I have all of my Wild Wonder 2024 coverage. You can see interviews with instructors. You can also see interviews with instructors, and you can see all of my day in summaries. Thank you so much, and subscribe to the channel. Give it a like. Consider giving a super thanks. I've been busting my butt making these videos and doing this marathon to help you learn more. All right, everybody. Bye. Keep up the nature journaling. What's wrong with my screen? Bye. So weird. Bye.